Welcome to the show where we unearth new ways of looking at ever-evolving life around the world, seen from a number of different industries, cultures, and backgrounds. But there's one thing that unites everyone I speak to. They all want to do their part to make the world better in their own unique ways. It's a uniting passion. Whether they're from the commercial world, third sector, or public sector, from the global north or the global south, my name is Philippa White, and welcome to TIE Unearthed. Hello, and welcome to episode 59 of TIE Unearthed. Today, I'm speaking with my childhood friend, Sarah Cohen, a people and culture professional and leader whose experiences in education, technology, and economics have shaped her pragmatic and innovative approaches to developing people and growing organizations. Sarah is a fan of learning, working hard and savoring each day you get with the people you love. And you'll definitely get a sense of this during our conversation. We talk about our shared love of education, how her background in education has shaped her new role in talent at Cubic Farms, and her thoughts on the importance of creating personal connections. I came off this chat buzzing. There's so many overlaps with her way of seeing the world and what we do at TIE. You'll definitely enjoy the energy on this one. So grab that favorite beverage or throw on those running shoes and enjoy this conversation with Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be with you here today.
I'm so excited for you to be here with us today. It's wonderful. So for our listeners, I always love this. I love it so people can picture where people are around the world. I talk to people all over the place from so many different backgrounds. Tell us, where are you?
Well, I am in sunny Vancouver today on the west coast of Canada in British Columbia, here in East Vancouver.
What's the weather like today?
Wonderfully sunny. We are rainforest, and we do need some rain coming up sooner than later, but it's always that push-pull. You know, you enjoy the sunshine, you know, you need the rain.
Yeah, because Vancouver's known for being quite rainy. So I'm sure part of you is like, oh, we need to have the rain come.
Yeah.
I know that you haven't always been in BC, and I know that because we grew up on the same street in Winnipeg. Now, I obviously ended up in Brazil, where I'm talking to all of you now, and you obviously ended up in Vancouver. And, you know, both of us have an interesting story that took us to where we are. And I often think of how beautiful that is, how there's various different puzzle pieces of life that, you know, they all start to kind of fit together and they start to create this picture. And your puzzle pieces are interesting. And I'd love to start with you telling us a little bit about your background and the journey that's taking you to where you are now.
I was thinking back to us growing up, literally across the street from each other. And one of my favorite memories, people listening may know that Winnipeg gets a lot of snow. And I remember one snowstorm where schools were closed and, you know, we were children, so we were small at the time, and waist deep snow was not an uncommon thing. But I remember watching you come across the street in a snowsuit, waist deep in snow. And it took a really long time.
It's so funny. It's so far away from my reality now. Oh my goodness.
You got your fill of snow and you were like, I'm done. I'm out.
It's so funny actually, because I live on the equator, pretty much just below the equator. And here people take cold showers all the time. Yes. And people sleep with sort of air conditioning in like a really thin sheet, or maybe not even a sheet. And I'm with a duvet, often without air conditioning, in hot showers, and no one can understand it. I just don't, what? You grew up in such cold weather. I think I've been traumatized.
Yeah, I feel that way about Vancouver too. Like I really feel blessed to live in Canada. I love so much about everywhere in Canada, but I'm good out here. I'm done. I'm done with winter.
Winnipeg was a good experience. We love Winnipeg, friendly Manitoba. Love it.
Yeah, but, love it. Best people, and I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
I'm good. You know, I'm just so flattered to have you say that my life is interesting. But I was thinking, like, what's interesting to share? And I've had opposite experiences through my life, different ends of the spectrum. And it's really the living in both ends that I've really valued, where it becomes, you know, sort of not about either or, that life really encompasses all of that. And I don't know how much you knew this when we were growing up, because I was in the French program at school. You were in the English program. There was this big segregating line through our school, but I really struggled in school. Turns out learning languages is not a skill of mine. I now know that there's stuff I could do that would help me with that. But yeah, learning French was slow for me. And it really kicked off sort of a level of disorientation in learning. Like I didn't understand what was going on in the classroom. Wasn't quick to learn how to read and write, had to put in extra time with that. And so certainly in the 80s where we grew up, you could be not that great at school and people didn't get super fussed, especially if you were a girl. I wasn't a behavior problem, so it's just sort of fine. But really, certainly school was not a place that I thrived. But growing up, we were middle class, my parents were educated, and so much going for us that really was supportive. And my mom insisted that we do music education and not just playing an instrument. We did the Royal Conservatory of Music program, which was very intensive, prescriptive. He did scales, he did chords, he did sight reading, memory playback. And I must have done that for about almost 10 years, all in. It was really around age 13 that I had this experience that still today I can feel through my whole body, where I started to understand things.
And what was it? What was that catalyst then? What was it that was the switch that went off? That was related, obviously, to your time at the Royal Conservatory. And how did that link up then with education?
Well, when you start to map out in the world of cognition, like what areas of the brain are really at play when you're especially doing piano, and there's so much work with eye tracking and attention to detail, and your working memory in the moment, and fine muscles and your executive functioning all plays a part. But there are sort of these areas of the brain where a lot of sensory information overlaps and where you are integrating information really quickly. And piano hit this level of complexity where the math was so complex. And then studying, you're working in multiple clefs of the treble clef, the bass clef, and then I started playing viola at school. So then you're working in the alto clef, and I also had to learn the tenor clef, and you're doing all this transposing, and you're taking symbols and making meaning out of them, and doing that in a whole variety of ways. But I really got into the world of special education as an adult, and you found other ways to do that more quickly, so it's not like a 10-year journey.
At the Royal Conservatory of Music, It's like, let's make it a little bit more accessible and quicker.
Yeah, mad props to the world of Royal Conservatory. They're wonderful. But I think also really that growth mindset that comes with learning a new music piece. You learn a new piece, you're terrible at it, you break it down, you take it in steps, you practice, you get better, you put it all together, it starts to flow, then it actually starts to become fun, then you turn it into art, then it's your own, and it's such an expression, and then you start something new and you're terrible at it. It's just like you learn how to learn. So really I think that was really huge. And right around that age too, I also found I started to understand people better. So instead of like social interactions kind of being a fog of things happening, I could see people and I could figure out what was going on and question things. So there was all kinds of growth at this one time. But at that same time was when my father was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so he started this real decline, but that's a very slow moving cancer. So he, had about a 10-year span. Went on to university, and I decided to study economics because I love math and I love people. And I really got into that, but I slowly tired of it. I felt quite alone in that. I think my thinking was fairly divergent. This also sounds weird to say, but there's not, at that time anyway, there wasn't a lot of sense of wonder about the world in economics. There was like a real flatness. People are rational in economics when they think about people. And it's like, but people are not rational. Like, let's actually talk about how people really are. I've since learned that there's a whole field of economics about behavioral economics. And actually, I was in the right spot, but I didn't know it then. There was this moment in my life, Philippa. So my father got sicker and sicker and sicker over time. And in his sort of last week, we had a big argument. It's not the ideal thing to do with the failing health of a parent, but I was still pretty young. But I think I was trying to pressure him to connect with some family members that he'd been more distant from and try to create a sense of urgency for him. I think he tried, and I found him later laying down on his bed and I went and laid beside him, and he was crying. And my father was not an emotional man. He said that he couldn't do it. He couldn't break through the wall. And he said he'd always thought that he would hit a point in his life where he would feel safe enough and brave enough to move past that wall that he had connecting with people, and that he always thought he would have more time. And he was crying because he was having that moment, reflecting back, oh, I missed it. There's a sense of tragedy that you would be sort of essentially on your deathbed with such intense heartache and regret. But that moment that he was able to be that vulnerable and share that was transformative for me.
Wow.
And it took me a while to kind of work with it. That fundamental lesson from a parent, there is no there. You will never get there. This is it.
What did that lead you to? How have you used that as that channel to then see things differently or do things differently? Or you said it was transformative. So what did it transform you to do?
Fundamentally, at the start anyway, it was the courage just to listen to what I was being called to and do that, even if I couldn't explain it to people always at the time. And fundamentally, that the most valuable thing in life was relationship. If that at the end of your life is what you were called to, it's not what you studied, it's not what job you did, it's those connections. That's it. So now as a parent myself, it also always dawns on me that the greatest gift we might be offering our children is showing them what not to do. They might be watching and going,
I'm not going to be like that.
Lesson learned. Thanks, Mom. And I laugh about that, but also actually what a gift that is. That it's not that as parents, we have to get it right. We have to be honest.
Yeah. Gosh. Wow. So talk to us about education. I think I'd love to understand, you have a love for education. I do believe that education is the key to a better world for sure. And can you talk to us about your experience in education, why you got to it, and then just some key learnings and takeaways from your time that stand out?
I studied to be a math science specialist teacher, middle school age range. What I ended up getting into was the world of special education. And of course, looking back, it's a complete fit. Wanting to help other students who are not thriving in the classroom. I know that feeling. You've been there, done that. And I still thought when I was doing that at first that it was helping children to learn how to read and write and do math to be successful at school. But I ended up working with a man named Howard Eaton, who started an Aerosmith school in Vancouver. And the Aerosmith program was created by a woman named Barbara Aerosmith Young, who also transcended her own learning challenges with different ways of strengthening weaknesses in the brain, and has created this program that still sometimes I'm like, how did she do this? She was just like one person. How do we set up the brain to be able to learn and thrive is really how I came to think of it. And that for me, that's the primary purpose of education. So I first started teaching. So I went through your teacher's college, but I just felt it wasn't quite for me. And I spent a year doing some traveling as a family's private teacher for their daughters. And their daughter was really struggling with different things academically. Your children do word problems for math, I'm sure, at some point.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's worst nightmare.
It is.
And we were working on all these word problems about sales tax. And we did about 4 or 5 of them in a row, and it just wasn't sticking. And finally I was like, do you know what sales tax is? And she was like, no. Why didn't you say anything? Hello? Didn't you ever notice you go to the store, want to buy something, there's a price sticker, but then you pay a different price when you go to buy it? Oh yeah. You didn't think to ever ask why that was the case? No. One of those moments where how I think is not the way other people think. My ability to question, to process information. I don't want to say that it's a privilege, but we all don't think the same way. We do not interact in the world in the same way with the information around us. And whatever education system people want to get down with, whether it's Waldorf or Montessori or democratic education or student-centered models, all of it's great. It really just depends on if that child and that individual is able to interact well with the world and the information around them and make sense of it. And if they're not, they're going to struggle no matter where they are. That was the joy of education. If I can help people to strengthen their ability to think about information and language, to understand nonverbal information from people and their surroundings, to process information more quickly and make sense of it and not be anxious all the time because they can't make sense of what's going on around them. Oh, it's just the best.
That's so amazing. That's such an amazing way to see education.
I had one, I'm going to use all fake names, so don't worry. I'll call him Josh. And what came to light is that he was actually a brilliant mind, but his thinking, his processing of information was so slow that he couldn't watch TV or a movie and understand it. He would go to the movies with his friends and just play a game with himself of seeing how much soda he could drink before he had to go to the bathroom because the world around him was basically inaccessible. He was in a state of constant anxiety because your brain cannot think quickly enough. And so to watch him speed up was mind-blowing.
And how did that happen?
Well, this Aerosmith program, we would assess, do a cognitive assessment on every student who came in, figure out where they're strong, where they're weak, and some of these fundamental areas related to learning. And then they would work on a program, for a good chunk of the day that would stimulate these weak areas. It's like physiotherapy almost for the brain.
Wow.
I've had my own children do the program, which was funny because as a teacher, my first year teaching it, I was like, I hope this works. Even though the science of neuroplasticity is real, that's not a made up thing. And then of course to watch these students go through changes throughout the year was just, I'll call her Rebecca. Partway through the year, I was like, what are you noticing? What's going on? What are the changes? Well, I understand jokes. And she was 15 and I was like, what do you mean? Well, I never knew really why most jokes were funny. I would just laugh when people laughed. Now I get it, that the word means two things.
Oh, wow.
Students who'd been through every tutoring program to learn how to read, and they could do the mechanics, but they couldn't make sense of it.
Yeah.
And to watch them become readers.
So you obviously worked in the area of education, but you are now at Cubic Farms in talent. So talk to us about that, because it's interesting going from the world of education in the area that you've worked in. And obviously it's now corporate talent.
Yes. Cubic Farms is indoor vertical farming. And there's a couple different ways, but really the big takeaway and the focus I think to think about is water scarcity is really a huge problem globally, full stop. And then in agriculture, especially globally, full stop. And indoor farming for, human food and livestock food, I think is just a huge part of the solution. And Cubic Farms is really one of the companies that are central in that. So we have two arms of the business. One is this indoor farming. And then there's the hydro green side of the business, which is entirely unique globally at this point, which grows nutritious livestock feed. Both sides, it's really growing in any climate. 365 days a year, no matter the weather. It was started by farmers to help farmers. So that was really the main pivot point of these two farmers being in a country after a hurricane and really seeing not only are schools disrupted and houses and all these things, the soil is gone. So there is no farming there anymore. How do you create food systems that are sustainable this way? With HydroGreen, they've got these automated vertical pastures, and I'll call them AVPs because that's easier. And so you've got these hydroponic vertically stacked growing layers in a controlled environment. And so you're effectively bringing grazing lands indoors and then harvesting fresh livestock feed daily, 365 days a year. And it's fully automated, very little labor. You don't need to use pesticides, which is also a big deal. Yeah. And it uses much less water than traditional farming. So just to anchor this in some visuals and stats, you can replace 500 acres of farmland with a dozen of these larger AVPs, which 500 acres is also hard to conceive of, but that's 378 football fields. So that's a lot of land saved. And we all know land is scarce, right? Yeah. And then we're using 95% less water than traditional outdoor growing. So that is massive. Another way to conceive of that is with a dozen of these machines, you're saving 500 gallons of water annually, which is enough to give every person on the planet one glass of water. So that's a lot of savings. That's huge. Yeah. That's one aspect that it benefits. It's been a while since we were living in North America, but you might know this, that drought has been a major issue throughout the Midwest of all of North America and also the West Coast. And farmers are making just horrific decisions, including almond farmers in California having to burn trees down so that their trees aren't pulling water from the aquifers. So we're looking at farmers deciding that they have to produce less, which is really not the place we want to be right now in the world, right? Helping farmers to find sustainable ways to keep their operations going is essential. But there are also all of these environmental benefits. So it's not just the water savings, but using these hydrogreen systems and the feed, it's reducing the methane that cows are producing. And so then through that, the company is also able to sell carbon credits.
How does your background then in education contribute to this role in talent at Cubic Farms? I mean, I know that the environment is very, very important to you and you have an incredible understanding of things from that point of view. And then obviously there's the background of education, but back to the puzzle pieces. It's really interesting how this picture starts to evolve. And I'd love you to connect the dots.
Connect the dots. So I taught high school for a number of years, moved into school administration, and then I got more into human resources or people and culture work within education. Businesses all over right now are really looking at this idea of how do we create a culture where we are growing our people and where they thrive. In my mind, I'm like, we need to make businesses a little more like schools. I mean, that's so simplified. It's like kind of too cutesy to say, but it really, for me, is when I'm recruiting people. I don't want to say that I love everyone because that sounds insane, but it's really about people exist. They matter. And I really approach every interaction with every person, just like you said, like they've got an interesting story to share. They are important in this world because they are. They exist. Here they are. They matter. For them to know that they've been seen and they've been heard. I'm also always really thinking, questioning and sort of evaluating how they think. How are they processing information? How are they responding to me in this interaction? How does that fit for the role? What kind of thinking is needed in that role? What kind of mind is needed in that role? And is this person's mind a good match for that? We're not all the same and we're not all suited for the same things. So that's really on the recruitment side. But then I really do approach the creation of programs and systems for people and retention, thinking about how we help people to thrive. Like what is it that is needed to help people grow? Build trust, build positive community. And I do think that foundation in economics, though at that time I felt kind of alien from it, but being able to work with the math of it all with people and that kind of grounding is really important.
Really, God, really interesting. I'm just curious, from your point of view, looking at the corporate world, because you're now in a very different environment than a school, even though there are those crossovers. But, looking at Cubic Farms or even just in general, because obviously you have your finger on the pulse, I'm sure, of a lot of things that are going on in the corporate environment. What would you say are some of the challenges that you see from a talent point of view?
There's sort of this dichotomy or tension right now that is very interesting to me that brings up a lot of things, which is that people sort of want to personalize things to how you want it. Don't we all like to work hybrid or remote, or we want to do it the way that works for us, but we also want, lots of connection and lots of meaning. And those don't have to be opposites, but it's definitely a new challenge. And I think it's quite an exciting challenge, actually, to think about how workplaces provide that leadership and that growth and development in all these new ways and helping people to be resilient. Everybody's work has gotten more complex. Love the technology, but it certainly hasn't made life simpler. But it's made things like this, what we're doing right now, possible. Maybe the way to put a handle on all of this is that mental health for people is really a huge thing right now. Complexity of work, nonstop information flow. There's less structures in place. So it's not that you have to go to work anymore. We have this freedom, but then having more choices is this other level of complexity. So in a way, none of them are problems to be solved. It's just these new dynamics to really be engaged with and listening to people about.
Now, you talked at the beginning beginning, and actually you've talked about it throughout, but your love of human connections. And I just wonder what your thoughts are, obviously working with Cubic Farms. Cubic Farms is a sustainable organization company. What are your thoughts on the importance of creating those strong personal connections to help create a sustainable business, either create or sustain a sustainable business?
I have two fundamental things come to mind for me is that through connection, you can build trust. Not trust that people are never going to do wrong or they're never going to hurt you, because, people will. They will do things that hurt you and upset you, and they will make mistakes. That's just a given from everybody in every relationship. But when you have trust, you're always aware of the humanness there. You don't make it about you. You don't make it about the other person. You can have that place of interaction. And I think when you have those connections, you really can build an inclusive work environment that really transcends all the differences. One experience in particular stands out to me, and it was not in the work environment, but I brought it with me. I traveled for a while in Panama. My father-in-law was stationed in Panama. He was a communications director for UNICEF. And my husband and I, after we got married, we spent some time traveling around, and his parents and us, we went around Panama, and we spent about a week in this mountainous area. We stayed at a bed and breakfast on a coffee plantation. And it was one man who owned the whole thing, and he was quite taken with my father-in-law's time at UNICEF because he had been awarded from UNICEF these certificates of appreciation because he built these schools on his plantation, so that Indigenous parents who would come certain times a year, migrate to his area, work on the plantation, their children could go to school. Now, this man, we got to know him a little bit. He was extremely conservative, extremely right-wing, a die-hard free market capitalist. It's certainly at that age, I would have said, very different than extremely Catholic, almost dogmatically, I want to say. And I spent time talking with him. He also had free-range chickens on his property. And I was like, that doesn't fit my box of what right-wing capitalist, upholding the patriarchy person. And so I spent some time talking with him. He said, people forget that you are impacted by the world around you. And he said, this is the biggest problem in capitalism today, is that people think when they walk down the street and they see someone who's homeless, that that's not hurting them. Why would I want to raise chickens in small cages where they're suffering? Why would I ever want to eat the meat of an animal whose life was spent in pure suffering? Why would I want to have my workers that come here that help me harvest the coffee not be supported? And that's always stuck with me. And I've kind of gone back and revisited some of Adam Smith's, original writings. And he was actually fundamentally about connection.
Really interesting.
Listen, I'm sure people could debate this for years, but when you go back and look at what he was pointing to in a time of warlords where you had no ability to kind of self-determine a lot of stuff in your life, is he was saying that when you do something and it produces a positive reaction from somebody, then you're onto something. That's something you can keep doing. The invisible hand. He didn't start from a place of it being about money. He started from a place of it being about connection. There's a lot of things we could say about capitalism, but part of it really always hit me that it's the humanity of it that actually is the missing component. And this person I thought I was opposed to in everything. Yeah. It was the connection of humanity that brought it in. If we were to sit down and have a political debate, we would have been opposing. And you think of how torn apart communities and countries and school systems, all of that. Now people are locked in just the idea part, the emotion
the ideology.
Part.
I know.
Yeah,
and we've stopped the conversation to understand what is somebody's reality to be able to get to that and then understand.
To see the person. Yeah. And so that lesson he taught me, I really carried forward. And it's, that's what you need on your teams at work. Yeah. That's what you need between managers and employees, like getting managers to sit down at least once a quarter with all their people, and just hear from them. You don't talk about, the KPIs or the OKRs. What's alive and real for that person right now?
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a matchup then between the purpose of the company. What is it that you're doing? And then the purpose of the individual. Exactly. And unearthing that. And if it's clear to what the purpose of the company is, and that's genuine and authentic. And then if you're supporting the individuals through those personal connections to be able to unearth their purpose, then you've got loyal people, right?
stay so long.
Yeah.
They want to make that work. They find their place in that. People's lives
they
are
feel understood.
Disrupted. You move around the world. You've got people are not involved in organized religion at the same level in a lot of places and Western countries, so there's a lot of disruption to community structures. And to have a workplace where you are seen and valued as for your fundamental humanity, and then you want to work. People like to work hard for something they believe in and where they feel valued. So
what are you working on at the moment that you think our listeners would find interesting or that inspires you?
I'm really jazzed right now about this idea of compassion and empathy in the workplace, which sounds all very soft and lovey-dovey. But again, you have to remember, I really like math. So I'm also not only interested in like the connectivity part of this, but also really interested in how it creates more efficient business, cost savings and all that kind of stuff. And so,
data. We like data.
I love data. I love math. For years in human resources, and people are used to this idea of employee engagement being really important. But what I thought was so interesting through the pandemic, and sort of part of that a bit, is employee engagement can be high and you still don't retain your people. Employee engagement does not mean that somebody's going to stick by that. And so you're starting to see a lot of companies use different metrics, ask different questions, and really ask, how do we help our employees to thrive? Which again is putting on their teacher hat. This is so interesting to me. So when you start to look at measures around thriving and develop all of these listening channels as a company, like you might have a survey, you might have town halls or AMAs or those quarterly meetings. You develop all of these channels to be able to listen to your people, and listening becomes a huge focus. So you're gathering numeric data, you're gathering qualitative data at the same time, and you're putting this together. And then I think companies that are really doing it right, and I think the way you want to approach it is then you want to share back what you're hearing people say. And you're not going to get it right every time. And for some employees, they'll be like, oh, I feel totally seen and heard by that. That's great. And other people are like, no, that's not what I said at all. And then you take action with that. Then you try to take action to address those unmet needs that you're hearing from people. And for me, it's foundationally based in the work of Marshall Rosenberg, who launched nonviolent communication, passionate communication, and
I love that.
Yeah. And Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, was a big advocate of that. And we had some overlap in the development of it at our school, and his love of it and using it with what he learned there. And when he became CEO of Microsoft, he took that into Microsoft. And they are now doing all of this employee listening work. I think it's influenced by that. So for me, that's the big exciting thing, is creating these channels of listening, of how you do that, and then track that in data. So you know that you're on track, and employees know that you're listening and they're feeling seen and heard. And you get into the neuroscience of that, how empathy really calms the whole system down and allows you to think more clearly. And we could go off in so many ways. But for me right now, that is, I think, some of the most exciting work.
Super interesting. And like you say, before, in this era of competition, the world is evolving. And I'd like to think that we're moving more to sort of an era of collaboration. And in that world of collaboration requires empathy, requires listening, active listening, asking questions, vulnerability. And it used to be seen as sort of these softer skills, and they're sort of like for the wishy-washy kind of airy-fairy kind of, okay, but we need the hard negotiation skills. We need and if you can put numbers behind this, that's everything. What keeps you up at night, and what gives you hope?
This is in no way a humble brag, but I think actually not a lot keeps me up at night anymore. I mean, I guess the glib answer is people keep me up at night and people give me hope. That aside, but I think the big one for me still that gives me the most stress is climate change. It kind of came to a head for me. I think it was we've had a number of bad forest fire summers, but there was one about 4 or 5 years ago where, we had to be inside for a lot of time. Like the sun was red. And, at first we were like, oh, we can still be outside. But after 4 or 5 days where the inside of your mouth just tasted like ash, we kind of all need to go inside. And I remember one night just crying, like fundamentally breaking down about it. My children children were 5 and 7, I guess, maybe a little bit older. And they saw me crying. And it's always a tough one as a parent because you don't want to hold back your emotions, but at the same time, you don't want to scare your kids, right? Like if you're really having intense grief, and I was really having that intense grief, I don't want this for my kids. There's nothing I can do about it, really. I mean, I can and I can't. It's both of those things.
Yeah.
And so once I really let myself have that grief and experience it, it became clear for us. It was like, okay, let's become a cycling family. Let's become one of those weird Vancouver families that tries to cycle. And my kids were not super into cycling before that, but they really, I think, heard what I was saying. And I think I was speaking from that kind of ground of truth, you know, when you really hit that place, you work through everything and
things need to change.
Things need to change. Yeah. So we don't drive hardly at all. We have an electric vehicle, but we really have positioned ourselves and made choices around housing and various things to be able to kind of get most everywhere by bike or walking or transit, live in smaller places, you know, those sorts of things. So that was, I guess, about 4 or 5 years ago. Then 2 years ago, I was out in my backyard and my younger son, Ezra, he looked at me and he goes, you know, we're in climate change, right? And I think he was 8. And I said, I know. And he's like, it's not good. He's like, I know. I said, you know, every point in the world, something real hard's going on for everybody. There's something around survival. And we were born at this time and we have an important role to play. We got to cool things off and we got to try to make things more fair. This is our time. This is our job. I mean, like the work you're doing, the work companies like Cubic Farms are doing. I mean, if everybody keeps
plugging away at it and hope
plugging away at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Fundamentally, that also gives me hope because we don't know how things are going to turn out. And I'm really glad I was born now and not 200 or 300 years ago, or I'd rather be here now, even though it's scary.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners?
Well, I think if people are listening to this podcast, they know this already, but I'm going to tell them in case they don't, which is that you are an incredible inspiration, Philippa.
Oh,
and you look surprised I say that. But you just are out there boldly, courageously doing that work and forging something that did not exist, that is innovative, that addresses these needs on so many different levels that people have. And so it's a real concrete change in people's lives and businesses and in communities. And then all those ripples out where you're just out there touching people's lives regularly with these messages of hope and light. I'm so grateful for you to be doing that. And it's so creative. I think that's almost one of the most incredible aspects of it. So I think
thank you.
That. So true. And I think I just want to say one more time, I guess I said it earlier, but I would encourage everyone just to live your life fully. Don't save yourself for that special day when you think things will change and finally be right.
Totally agree. The time is now.
The time is now to live your life so that you get all used up by the end of it. You don't hold out that energy for the 9th inning or whatever. Like just play it like this is the game right now. And it's really for you.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, we're alone. We're in it together, but we're also really alone.
And the thing is no one is going to be able to live your life for you. And I think that's exactly it. Don't wait for the permission from someone else or for the perfect moment. I think that's such a great way to leave this, because thinking of your dad and the turning point for you, how you've opened up the opportunity to so many people that you've worked with from the schools and what you're doing now. And everyone has the power to be able to make a change in their own way. In the time of now. What a wonderful conversation. Sarah, I have been covered in goosebumps and it's so funny. My children, when I listen to music or when I hear something that is, I have this thing and I really do, I just get covered in goosebumps. And it's often that my children, I don't know, I'll be driving and they might say something, or I'm listening to a song and my daughter who's in the front seat is always looking at my leg or looking at my arm and she's like, did it work? So it's a thing. And I've been covered in goosebumps for the majority of this conversation. So thank you. Thank you very much for
the invitation. It's been a real pleasure, Philip.
Until next time.
Until the next snowstorm.
Until the next snowstorm.
Trudging across the street.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye.
Thank you, Philippa. Bye.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. This is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now, this is your chance to get involved with Thai. If you work in the commercial world, whatever your profession, your position, or your experience, then Thai could be for you. You may have been in business for decades, but have always felt there's another way. Or you may just have a few years' experience, but want to do more. Equally, if you want to create game-changing employees and see your company impact the world, we've got you covered. TIE has never been more necessary than right now, and you can be a part of it. Reach out to me at philippa@theinternationalexchange.co.uk and I can tell you more. Or join the TIE Accelerator info session for more information. apply.tieaccelerator.com. Better leaders, better companies, better world. I'm your host, Philippa White. This podcast has been co-produced by Berna Vieira and me, music by Berna Vieira, and artwork by Kelps Vahais. I hope we'll meet again soon.